morning to you all. It is Thursday, and for some of us, we may not know this, but it's actually called Maundy Thursday. And Maundy Thursday is derived from this Latin term, which means command. And it actually is referring to Jesus as he gives his command in chapter 13, verse 34 of John, where he says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you are to love one another, just as I have loved you, and you also are to love one another." And while Maundy is derived from the Latin, yes, Maundy is also in reference to another command that Jesus gave, which was to wash each other's feet. Now, this may not sound too promising for a few of us that maybe don't like feet at all, and I don't blame you. But there's a bigger picture here that Jesus was doing, okay? And now this is our first stop on this journey as we've been going through this Passion Week. This is our first stop on this Maundy Thursday. And John chapter 13 is where we find the story of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. And if you have a chance to today, which you should, is read John chapter 13. It's just an incredible chapter of what's going on here and just kind of the bigger picture of what's happening here in the Passover meal. But just as like I just said, this is the Passover meal, and Jesus and his 12 disciples are there. That's right. Jesus and his 12 disciples. Judas is there. Judas, the one who's going to betray Jesus, is present here. And as the meal's underway, maybe they're talking, maybe they're just speaking about the Israelites and their journey from Egypt and what Moses did and how they got to the promised land and stuff. Like maybe they were just talking about what that Passover meant. And while they were eating and consuming food and kind of in this whole Passover Seder meal kind of thing, Jesus gets up and he takes a towel. And the towel in that moment was meant for the servant. And Jesus wraps himself around the waist with it. And then he begins to pour water into a basin, and he goes to each disciple and he begins to wash their feet. And if you don't know a whole lot about Jewish culture, know like they didn't sit at tables. They didn't even like sit like cross-legged around a table. Like they would recline at tables where they would have one arm like propping themselves up, and their feet would be behind them so that they could eat with one hand really close to the table like this, and their feet would be behind. And the servant most likely would come around and they would wash their feet, and to where, yeah, you would know that someone was washing your feet, but you wouldn't really pay attention to them. And now, I don't believe that they had any idea that Jesus was not washing their feet. I think they had full awareness that Jesus was going behind them and washing all of their feet. Because some even put up a fight. They said, no, Jesus, you can't wash my feet. But you see, washing feet also gets lost in translation for us, because we see washing feet and we go, why? Like we have socks and we have shoes on, like no one needs to wash our feet, right? No one needs to touch my feet. But that wasn't the case back then. Back then, some people didn't even have shoes, or they had sandals, which got dusty and muddy, and they had like animals didn't just go out to pasture to go to the bathroom, and like people didn't clean up after their dogs or anything like that. Like there was poop everywhere, like there was poop everywhere, and like they would step in it and be on their feet, like they were stepping in all sorts of different things. And the person, when they would come into the house, a person would be designated to wipe and clean their feet. It was not a glorious job, and a job that a rabbi would never do, which is what Jesus was. He would never be tasked to wash people's feet. Others were there to wash the feet. Yet in this moment, he gets up from the spot at the table and he begins to wash his disciples' feet. Some put up a little bit of a fight, but Jesus tells them that he has to do it. And here's what Jesus is doing. He's humbling himself, as if to continue as if coming to the world as a helpless babe was not enough. Jesus again is showing that there's no role, there's no one that's better than another. And even the Son of God got onto his knees in a lowly position and he washed the feet of his disciples. And like there's a couple other things too here that are just really, really incredible, because Jesus also says that he laid down his outer garment. Like he laid down his outer garment. When he got up and he laid down his outer garment, and then he took the towel and wrapped it around his waist. But to that term laid down is actually seen a lot of times in John. It's actually the same wordage. It's in John 15:13. It says, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friend." Or about John 10:11 that says, "I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep." And see, he laid down his outer garment, but then other times that word is used is in reference to death, laying down a life. And so Jesus took out this outer garment, which, you think about when he came down from heaven to the earth as a babe, like he laid down his glory, and he took on a form of a human, and he came down and he laid down his outer garment to take on the role of a slave, and then he was also going to lay down his life to take on the role of the sacrificial lamb that was going to be put on the cross. You see, that's what laying down his life meant, and we cannot lose that in the weeds here. That is a very clear picture of what's happening in this moment. And not only is he doing that, but he's humbling himself. He's taken this towel that was meant for a slave, and he is putting it around his waist, and that same towel he's using to dry off the feet of his disciples. See, her servanthood was not a natural response of a rabbi or his followers. What I find interesting is the fact that Judas is there. The one who was going to betray Jesus. Jesus washed his feet. He went around the room. He went around to each of the 12 disciples and he washed their feet. Maybe he prayed over them silently, because I'm sure it was a little awkward having their rabbi, their teacher, their master teacher, wash their feet. Maybe Jesus prayed for them during that time. I know if it was me and I was there with Judas, I don't think that I would have been very kind. I don't think I would have washed his feet very well. I can't even say that I would wash his feet. I would have been mad, yet Jesus took it in stride to show that we needed not just to be clean on the outside, but also on the inside too. We need to humble ourselves. And as Judas leaves the room as a friend, he'll return as an enemy. And as Jesus sat back down, as he draws to the end all of this Maundy Thursday, he gives a command, right? We already talked about this, John 13:34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I loved you, and you also are to love one another. Love one another. Jesus, if you recall, has also told them to wash each other's feet. Two kind of commands here, like not necessarily command, like where he's saying like this is another command, like wash your feet, but he's saying like do it, like wash each other's feet. John 13:14. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. You see, Jesus loved us. He humbled himself for us, showing us that nothing is below us. Jesus led by being a servant. And so the question that I want to ask today is, whose feet do you need to wash? See, Jesus washed his disciples' feet, I believe, to show them humility, to maybe even offer that forgiveness. Maybe you need to humble yourself before someone. I recall on our wedding day, as Brittany was coming down the aisle, and oh man, she was just absolutely gorgeous. She still is gorgeous, but man, on this day, she was all dolled up, and she was so beautiful coming down in her white dress. And she came down the aisle, and her father said those words that every groom longs to hear, to make sure that everything's on the up and up. When the pastor asks who gives this daughter the daughter away, and he says her mother and I. And he took my hand and took Brittany's hand and put them together. And Brittany and I started making our way to the altar. But before we got up there, I peeled off to a chair that I'd set up. And I sat her down, and there was a bowl of water and a towel. And I proceeded to wash her feet. I proceeded to wash her feet because I wanted her to know that as we entered into marriage, that I was going to be a servant for her. Not for her to boss me around or anything like that, but to show her that I love her so deeply that I'm willing to give my life for her, that I care for her. And Paul talks about in Ephesians that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. And you know what Christ did for the church? On Friday, we're going to talk about it more, but he went to the cross and he died for the church. That's how I wanted to start our marriage, by humbling myself and becoming a servant to my wife. This new commandment I give to you, love one another just as Christ has loved you. So another kind of question as we're all kind of just wrapping up here is, who do you need to show love to today? And we'll see in a little bit about what the rest of the Passover meal looks like. But But join me in a couple hours as we kind of unveil that and kind of talk about that a little bit more, and why the cup of redemption, I think, has so much more meaning to it than we let on. So join me in a couple hours and we'll see you soon. Know that you are loved.